It didn't happen overnight. The situation inside Western Australia's notorious youth detention facilities has been deteriorating for years.
It's lawless, it's inhumane. It couldn't get any worse.
And we are paying the price for it now.
Look at all the little ones that are here. They're the next generation growing up. Are they in the next cell, getting bashed around? Stop it now!
The state government says there are no simple solutions for managing youth who are
most complex, challenging and often dangerous.
But the warnings have been loud and clear, including from a top judge responsible for sending young criminals there.
A barbaric dungeon, worse than any adult prison.
We begged them not to open up Unit 18, and they did!
In 2022, the prison's watchdog told 7:30.
I was really concerned that we would finish up with a youth suicide, and those concerns haven't gone away.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
It's been 6 months since Rhiannon Dodd got the phone call. It was October 12, the day after her birthday.
Nobody want to get a phone call from a unit and say that your son is fighting for his life. That's the worst feeling that anybody in this world can go through. That's when we seen Cleveland before he went to make it there.
16-year-old Cleveland Dodd was found hanging in his cell in the early hours of the morning. He died in hospital a week later. That tragedy is what brings Rhiannon here, to a Perth motel 950 k's from Laverton, where Cleveland grew up.
We're the kids from Laverton Youth Centre. We have got a lot of woods here, you can see.
Here he is as a young boy, talking about collecting firewood for elders. Every day she's travelled to the Perth Coroner's Court, hoping to find out how Cleveland became the first child to die in youth detention in Western Australia. He was first sent to WA's only youth detention centre, Banksia Hill, when he was just 12 years old. He was in and out a few times in the years that followed. Then, in September 2022, he was transferred to a new facility known as Unit 18.
Christine, tell me, where are we and why are we here today?
We're standing in the middle of our newly gazetted youth custodial facility.
Unit 18 is part of Casuarina Prison, a maximum security adult men's prison. It was opened after riots at Banksia Hill and was described as a way of keeping staff and the state's most challenging juveniles safe.
The amount of destruction that these detainees have been undertaking on that site means that I can't look after them safely on that site anymore.
According to WA's Children's Court President, Hilton Quayle, the destructive behaviour at Banksia Hill was a result of detainees being placed in extended periods of solitary confinement.
All rise.
As a serving judge, Quayle declined 7:30's interview request, but in previous sentencing remarks he's described it as
prolonged, systematic dehumanisation and deprivation.
Kids are in there for 22 hours a day, 23 hours a day. We can't go past what Paul Cleveland went through. Out of his 86 days, 75 of those days were at least 22 hours in his cell, in a grotesque, stir-crazy cell. That is a recipe for acute and chronic unwellness.
The inquest heard Cleveland was sent to Unit 18 because he was self-harming, absconding and being aggressive with staff. It heard that virtually all the detainees there self-harm, but unlike Banksia Hill, Unit 18 does not have an intensive supervision unit for monitoring suicidal detainees. And because they often cover their cell cameras, it is impossible to monitor them 24/7. So, no one was watching when Cleveland fatally self-harmed.
There's every amount of supervision afforded to people in the intensive supervision unit is afforded to juveniles in Unit 18. It is the safest place we have for this group.
But that's not true, is it? Because at the ISU at Banksia Hill, they can be monitored, they can be seen at all times, but in their cells, all they need to do is cover the camera and they can't be monitored at all times.
Juveniles were covering cameras. I can't talk about specifically about the inquest, but there's fewer incidents of that occurring, but it still does happen, but the covering is not tolerated and it is removed.
On October 11, Cleveland had only been out of his cell, which had no running water and was described by staff as unlivable, for just 1 hour. That night, his requests for water, Panadol and to see a nurse were all denied.
I think to actually, lock children and young people, anyone up, and to deprive them of water would constitute cruel and inhumane treatment. Just water that night could have changed the whole situation for Cleveland. Just a caring response. It didn't happen.
He told custodial officers through his cell intercom that he was going to kill himself on 8 separate occasions before he was found unresponsive.
I've attended every day of the inquest. And one thing shocked me more than others. When they said, some of the guards, some of the custodial officers said that they weren't recording every critical incident, every self-harm, every suicide attempt, that shocked me. We're still getting self-harm data that's lower than what it should be.
CCTV footage played in the coroner's court shows youth custodial officer Daniel Torrijos looking in Cleveland's cell at 1:50 a.m. He turned and walked hurriedly away to get the keys to open the cell. Around this time, the CCTV appears to show the senior custodial officer, Kyle Mead Hunter, sitting in a reclined position in a darkened room. Mr. Torrijos says he told the senior officer, "Cleveland's fucking hanging," before heading back to the cell. The court heard that the response time of Mr. Mead Hunter did not appear hurried. He's seen on CCTV walking while buttoning up his shirt and also with his hands in his pockets. At 1:51 a.m, Mr. Torrijos arrives back at the cell and starts CPR. Mr. Mead Hunter arrives shortly after.
And what we saw on the TV was very wrong. While Cleveland laid in that cell, gasping for breath to save himself, they strolled down the hallway.
Because Mr. Mead Hunter is yet to appear at the inquest, we don't yet know what he was thinking as he walked to Cleveland's cell or why he was partly undressed. Unit 18's former day shift manager, Christina Mitchell, described conditions there as soul-destroying.
I spent a lot of my day in worry because I couldn't give them the supervision they required.
How do you explain sending the most suicidal detainees in the state to a facility that had no way of monitoring them properly?
So the courts decide that juvenile offenders are to be incarcerated for the safety of the community, and that is what happens. That's how juveniles end up in detention.
You don't send kids to prison, obviously, but
No.
the government had to approve Unit 18.
Yes.
That facility had no way of monitoring people there properly, and they're the most suicidal detainees in the state.
It's the safest place we have for this really challenging, complex and very often dangerous group who are a threat to themselves and to other juvenile detainees and staff. It's not ideal. We've said that all along. That's why we've allocated $1 million to a business case to design and identify a better location purpose-built for this cohort.
Hannah McGlade is a Noongar human rights lawyer and a member of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues.
It is completely unacceptable to lock children up in an adult prison facility. It violates Article 37 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and so we are clearly breaching international law there, and we're putting those children's lives at risk.
Suicide prevention researcher Jerry Georgatis has been supporting Cleveland's family throughout the inquest. He's acutely aware that this month marks 33 years since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody handed down its 339 recommendations.
What will come from this inquest is findings. They've come before. I've listened to inquest after inquest. So I worry, and I haven't built up the expectations for the family, the affected, and I've prepared them to be ready for a betrayal of expectation, but also not to take away their hope. We've got to keep on fighting.
Cleveland's coronial inquest will recommence in July, when senior management officials will be called to explain how the state's most at-risk detainees ended up in a facility that was, in the words of Unit 18 staff, set up to fail.
Well, I thought my son was coming home to me. You think your son is safe in prison, getting watched 24/7, but this happens. I came this far without giving up because of him, because of my son.
If that story has raised any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14, or you can call the crisis helpline for First Nations people, 13 Yarn, on 13 92 76.